our opponent is gravity. Like we have to overcome.
That directionality is very, very unique. How do you teach an athlete to own directionality?
So the body can self-organize.
I highly, highly encourage people to listen to this again because every so many minutes was this incredible mic drop moment. Hello and welcome to another episode of Root to Rise. My name is Dr. Emily Splichal, your host. And today we have what I know is going to be a very exciting conversation because it is going to be around three of my favorite topics: feet, fascia, and performance. And my guest is a colleague turned very good friend that I've been speaking next to or alongside for probably over a decade. And his name is Bill Parisi. Now, before we bring him on, I do want to share a little bit about this incredible gentleman. So Bill Parisi, he is a legendary coach, entrepreneur, and founder of the Parisi Speed School, which is one of the most influential performance training systems in the world. In addition, he is the founder of the Fascia Training Academy, and we'll be diving into that soon. Bill works on bridging science, coaching, and human behavior with a focus on fascia, movement quality, and long-term athletic development. His mission is simple. It is to build better movers, stronger minds, and more durable humans. In this episode, we will explore the future of athletic performance, the role of fascia in human potential, and what it truly means to build athletic power from the ground up. So, of course, we're talking about the feet, the nervous system, and foundations in human movement. Thank you, Bill, for being on the show, and welcome.
My pleasure, Emily. It's an honor to be here, and I'm so excited to be working with you now more closely. I remember when we first met, where you were one of the pioneers to get involved with the NFL teams when I was running their educational events and programs. You were a big part of that, and I know you continue to be.
Yeah, thank you. And this is clearly long overdue and working together. I just remember being next to each other at the Perform Better Summits, and I was like, there's got to be some synergy there, and of course there is. But
Yes.
when we did a webinar a few weeks ago, and that is when I first started to get a little bit deeper lens or perspective of how you look at feet and fascia, which is totally speaking my language. And we were saying a lot of very similar things, but in slightly different angles. So from that, I learned your story about starting with javelin and how you were introduced into a different lens of looking at athletic power and then, of course, fascia. Can you share a little bit about that for the listeners so they can get an understanding of your perspective?
Sure. Started out as an undersized, slow high school athlete, played football. Coach said, go out for track, went out for track. The coach said, try every event, tried all the events, took a liking to the javelin throw, was pretty good at it. A lot of biomechanics will use the javelin throw as an example to express human movement and force production, and really how to manage ground reaction forces, actually to transfer through your whole body, right? From the ground all the way through your hand to hand speed. And I really dove into that and wound up being a top 10 thrower in the country my senior year, went on to earn a full scholarship in the javelin, believe it or not. And then traveled the world, competing and learning from some of the best athletes in the world. And that was really how I got introduced to, functional training, or I should say, moving away from traditional training. And this was in the 80s, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. So I've been on this kind of, approach for a very, very long time, training the fascia system, but I didn't know it was fascia back then, right? I just thought I was training for athleticism and the expression of force, and how to express force in a way that is going to optimize performance and human movement and longevity. So now there's so many things that are coming out due to the ultrasound equipment, the advancements in technology that really allow us to understand the human body and how to absorb force and then ultimately return force and express that force in different ways. So it really comes down to the management of forces, management of gravity and ground reaction forces, and how we do that as everyday people, how we do that as athletes is critical. And I look at that through more of a biotensegrity lens.
Okay. I love that. Can you define that word for the listeners?
So
Oh,
tensegrity,
yep.
uh, it's a combination of your compression elements, let me get in here, compression elements, which are the steel bars held
Mm-hmm.
together with these tensile tension elements, which are more the cables, right? So that's a tensegrity model. So it's compression held together with tension, or the compression are
Okay.
the metal struts with the tension. Now, that concept of tensegrity is very energy efficient,
Okay.
meaning that it's a stable but flexible object that allows movement but also has this stability. So it's kind of moving away from the traditional Newtonian approach where you think of building stacking bricks on one top of one
Mm-hmm.
another, and you're building this column. Well, that's stable but not flexible, right? And
Right.
if you build a bridge in California like that, well, the first earthquake, they're going to collapse, right? They have to have an
Mm-hmm.
element of movement and have to have some type of flexibility. And the human body is built that way. And Dr. Stephen Levin really brought that to the forefront. So tensegrity was around for a while. Um, the concepts were created many years ago. But when Dr. Levin, who's an orthopedic spine surgeon,
Mm-hmm.
was in the Natural Museum of History in Washington, D.C., looking at this great big dinosaur. And he, did the math in terms of how heavy the bones were and the skull and the neck, the vertebrae, and then looked at the muscle tissue on that dinosaur, and it didn't add up. The skeleton didn't have enough muscle tissue to hold up the head and neck. Kind of like when you use the Newtonian viewpoint,
Mm-hmm.
building a brick column on an angle, right? Like it
Yep.
would collapse unless
Yep.
it was rooted into the ground and had steel rebar to reinforce and all this, it would
Yep.
collapse. Well, like the dinosaur didn't have that. And then he walked outside and he was like puzzled and he was doing the math and did all these calculations, went back and forth to the museum. And then he noticed this tensegrity structure
Mm.
outside, and he coined the word biotensegrity. So the body
Okay.
is a series of compression elements, the bone, skeletal system, held
Mm-hmm.
together with tensile elements, ligaments, tendons, fascia,
Mm-hmm.
tissues. These tensile elements that allow us to absorb force and return force in a holistic, full body fashion. And whenever
Okay.
there's a issue or there's a change in balance in any one of those areas, obviously it could lead to a change throughout the entire structure. So
Yep.
that's how I look at the human body, how I look at human performance, and it starts at the feet, right? Because that's where
Yep.
most of the issues occur,
Yep.
with the feet being bound up and not having that ability to absorb force and be that really nice shock absorbing system that can allow force to transfer smoothly up the kinetic chain. So,
Yep.
yeah, that's my long-winded answer, or I should say short-winded answer for a
Yeah.
very
Exactly.
complex subject.
But I love that, and I love the way that you word it and how you refer to this Dr. Levin and how his perspective. So, just so the listeners can hear how you view this, how do you then refer to gravity? And I know you've said some keywords in there, such as like force and impact transfer, et cetera. But how do you talk to your athletes about gravity? Or do you talk to your athletes about
Yeah, no,
gravity?
gravity is our opponent, right?
Yeah.
We need to punch gravity in the face. And
Okay.
what does that mean? Yeah, yeah. So, from an athletic standpoint,
Yeah.
right?
Okay. I love
So
it.
we're always trying to overcome gravity to be athletic and to be
Okay.
fast and
Okay.
explosive. So when you think of a martial artist, and this is a really great example, you think of someone like Bruce Lee, right? The 2 inch punch. And you
Mm-hmm.
can Google that, the amount of force he can create, or he was able to create in 2 inches, and the amount of force this 165-pound man can generate. I always say I would rather get punched in the chest by a guy that can bench press 600 pounds opposed to a guy like Bruce Lee.
Yeah.
Because a guy like Bruce Lee would kill me, right? A bench presser probably wouldn't. So it's a different type of force
Okay.
production. And it's a combination of utilizing the connective tissue, the fascia system, and its neurology to
Okay.
create high levels of speed and rate of force production, followed by massive co-contractions that create pulsing stiffness.
Okay.
And that is the essence of athleticism. The essence of athleticism is the ability to overcome ground reaction forces. So as a martial art athlete, and when you think about martial arts, there's many forms of martial arts. There's
Mm-hmm.
Brazilian jiu-jitsu, there's taekwondo, there's aikido, there's all different types of different arts that athletes study. Let's use taekwondo as an example, and
Mm-hmm.
simple punching and kicking. Well, these athletes, they're not necessarily lifting a lot of weights, right? But they can generate massive amounts of force, and their opponent is a bag or an opponent, in the competition, and their ability to generate these forces, on a more of a horizontal, plane,
Mm-hmm.
is tremendous. We want to do the same thing. Our opponent is gravity. Like, we
Okay.
have to overcome gravity,
Okay.
and managing and developing these skills in terms how to harness that energy through
Okay.
training the fascia, the neurology of the fascia, is how I look at gravity and how I want to overcome it. Because as an athlete
Yeah.
moves on the athletic field, it comes down to a few things: how fast we can generate force,
Okay.
how much force can we generate in that short period of time, and in
Okay.
what direction are we
Okay.
applying that force? Because that's going to determine where and how we move.
Yeah. I like the directionality of it. So it's timing was the first one, right? Kind of
Yep.
that rate, volume, theoretically, you
Yep.
could say,
Yep.
and then
Yep.
directionality. I
Yep.
think I absolutely love that. And that's the side of you're heavy on the side of the performance. I'm seeing breakdown of performance injuries and compensations that I'm trying to get them better so I can pass them back over to you. But that directionality is very, very unique. Can you just share a little bit more about that as far as directionality, and how do you teach an athlete to own directionality?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's no different than a martial artist learning different techniques in punching and blocking
Okay.
and kicking and whatnot. So as we move, in space, as the on the athletic field, whether it be a
Mm-hmm.
court or field, or whatnot, or even track,
Mm-hmm.
there's phases to movement, right? We really break them down to two macro phases, right? Two macro phases of movement is basically linear speed and
Okay.
multi-directional speed,
Okay.
right? So there's two macro phases. Now, underneath those phases, we break them down further. So in linear speed, there's acceleration,
Okay.
and then there's maximum velocity sprinting. So when
Okay.
we run in a linear straight ahead fashion, we accelerate, and then we break that down to the next phase, which is initial acceleration, transitional acceleration, and then going into maximum speed. So
Mm,
there are the force angles going into the ground, the amount of time we spend on the ground when we're accelerating. It's more horizontal
okay.
in nature, the force angles. And as we come out of acceleration, the force angles going into the ground as we hit maximum speed are more vertical going into the ground. So
Okay.
the direction of force is different compared to accelerating to running at top speed. The amount of time we spend on the ground, the force application phase, which we call the expression of force,
Okay.
is different as well when we accelerate compared to running at top speed. So that's
Got it.
linear speed. And there's
Okay.
body positions and angles we talk about, training methodologies we talk about to enhance the ability to accelerate, which is really critical in all sports,
Yeah.
and then obviously running at maximum velocity. The other component, multi-directional speed, we break down
Okay.
to four subcategories. The first category is deceleration.
Mm-hmm.
Deceleration training, understanding how to slow down. Like, would you get into your car today if it didn't have any brakes? No,
Yeah.
right? Would you get on a plane if the pilot didn't know how to land? No.
Yeah.
So why would we coach our athletes to go out there and play sport if they never really understood or how
Uh-huh.
to learn? Decelerate.
Yeah.
Deceleration is a skill, and when you practice and train that the way we do, you're not only going to enhance the skill of deceleration, but you're going to really help develop the neurology, but also enhance tendons and ligament strength. And there's been studies that show these ligaments actually grow in volume and in size when you load them
Yeah.
correctly. So that's one phase of and there's body angles and how we accept forces from gravity, ground reaction forces in decel. Then we have change of direction, which is a pre-planned movement, a pre-planned approach to practicing deceleration, then reaccelerating. And
Okay.
we know exactly what that move is going to be. We're rehearsing it. We're building like motor engrams or motor skill, like building this motor vocabulary, for a lack
Okay.
of better words. We're
Okay.
learning this foundational movement and building a vocabulary of motor skill. So that's the second phase of 4. The third phase is curvilinear running, being able to run on curves. So the
Okay.
expression of force is different when we run on curves.
Okay.
Obviously, it's more of an angular position, and depending on the feet, will be either inverted or everted, and forces going through the foot at
Mm-hmm.
speed with these
Mm-hmm.
different foot positions. We need to experience that and express those forces at
Yep.
those angles at speed to prepare the tissues and to prepare to create those ground reaction forces on running on curves. And then
Okay.
last but not least is our agility, our
Okay.
multi-directional reactionary training, where now it's more
Okay.
managing chaos and putting those first 3 components
Okay.
together, so the body does that naturally, and the
Okay.
body begins to self-organize in terms of without mental thought, and that's called movement literacy. So we take this foundational movement system that we actually, put together, over the last 35 years
Mm-hmm.
of linear speed, multi-directional speed, build a foundation of vocabulary movements, so motor vocabulary, you know, have that foundation, and then bring it into a chaotic environment, a non-predictable environment, and now have the athlete train. So we hopefully retain some of that vocabulary, so it now becomes second nature. Just like learning a language, right? When
Yeah.
you learn to speak a new language, you're totally
Yep.
locked in. You're learning vocabulary, you're learning words. Then after you're good at it, boom, it flows. And
Mm-hmm.
listen, if you want to become a better speaker, a better writer, you're always working on vocabulary, you're always working
Yep.
on words, you're always working on how to use words. And now you become a great writer, you can become a great speaker, and you're
Yep.
highly literate, right? You're learning new things, you're learning new, just ways to express yourself,
Yeah.
philosophies, history, whatever it may be. Well, movement is the same way. We take
Yep.
that same paradigm in movement that we do in the human language.
I love that. And when someone is just speaking my language, it always gives me goosebumps. When you were talking about it, it's like, oh my God, where's my pen and paper? I need to take notes on this. So
Yeah, yeah.
for the listeners, I would rewind it and listen to that again, because that is, to me, one of the biggest demonstrations that you know what the bleep you're talking about. And that's why you are the founder and really this name and face behind speed and athletics. It's so, oh my gosh, Bill, I loved that. I'm an academic nerd and I
Yeah,
loved
yeah.
that. I love that. So
Well,
this is just a,
I was just
go
going to
ahead.
say the goal is always to make it simple, right? Like the goal for me is always to make complex subjects simple, and hopefully I do that
Yeah,
in
no,
speech.
but it makes total sense. But there's also a methodology behind it where it's not just, well, to run fast, you just practice running fast, right?
Right.
And just like do the 100-meter over and over and over. There's obviously the technicality in it. And I'm sure you've worked with some high-level track athletes as well in your
Yeah.
history
Yeah.
to get that
Yes.
speed.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
but I'm curious, just on my own personal side, is how did you get involved with the combine then and the NFL?
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, it goes back to it goes way back to 1992. I mean, it's funny because I when I graduated college, I was an All-American, and I went to a lot of different seminars and educational events when I was in college, going to strength and conditioning seminars around the world. Literally, I went to Finland for a summer and I competed there. I was
Yeah,
just I put fundraisers together. I was 20 years old, traveling the world,
I
learning about
love
human
it.
performance in
Yeah,
1987, 1989, and I'm still on that tangent today. So I don't
yeah.
know. I don't think this. I mean, it's just what I do, right? For the last 40, coming up on 40 years now, just attacking. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, I did that. I went to a local seminar here in New Jersey. The head strength coach of the New York Giants, they just won the Super Bowl, was giving a seminar, and he
Okay.
flew in this guy, Angel Spazov from Bulgaria, who
Okay.
was an Olympic lifting coach for the Bulgarians. They won all the Olympic medals for the Olympic lifts back in the 80s. They probably knew how to
Mm-hmm.
use drugs better than anybody else, but they did have a lot of good techniques. So I
Mm-hmm.
went to this seminar, sat in the front. I was 21 years old, asking questions. And then the head strength coach of the Giants, we started talking. He, tell me about yourself. What's going on? And I told him I just got back from Finland. I just got off an All-American season throwing the javelin. I think my best was like 238 or something like that. And it was really impressive. I want you to come down and train Phil Simms on those medicine ball drills you'll learn. So my
Yeah.
first client, I was 21, was Super Bowl MVP Phil Simms.
What?
Yeah,
Oh my
yeah,
God.
in 1989, and that catapulted me to continue this quest. And then from there, I actually moved down to Florida, trained with Tom Puskas, who was the American record holder, and then was the strength coach for the track team at Florida,
Okay.
and then moved back up here, and started the business, and really started to continue to unpack. And then having that relationship with Johnny Parker, and then starting my business, they have this event every year. The strength coaches do, where they recognize each other at the
Mm-hmm.
combine. They award each other,
Yep.
and it got to a point in the early 2000 middle 2000s, they asked me to come and help out, and
Mm.
get involved, and take it
Okay.
to the next level. And I did that for 13 years, and that's
Oh
where
wow.
I got
Okay.
you involved. You
Yep.
came to the event, and I
Yep.
put together a great banquet for them. I put together education. I worked,
Yep.
Gatorade hired me to put together education for them and bring in different speakers. And it was a
Yep.
great run. I did that for 13 years. And now I handed it back to the strength coaches, and they made it an
Mm.
official nonprofit organization,
Oh wow.
which is great, run by them with an executive board. My role, I kind of got them together. When I first got involved with those guys back in 2010, no one talked to one another. Like they were
Mm.
kind of like really standoffish, and we would get
Okay.
at the combine. I would have sponsors come in. We would buy a great dinner for everyone, and I would go around the room and have everybody say who they are, what their goals are, and
Yeah.
start to break down those walls.
Yeah.
And it was a great opportunity, to do that.
Yeah.
That's how I got involved.
I love it. I love it. So to switch gears a little bit, I know you're the founder of the Fascia Training Academy. When did you find this? We all know you love fascia, but what is your goal behind the Fascia Training Academy, and kind of what do you see as like the future of that?
Yeah, I mean, my discovery of fascia really is when my oldest son started playing competitive basketball, and he kind of made this high level team, and I saw these athletes competing at 14
Hmm.
years old, dunking,
Yeah.
and I noticed none of them had a lot of muscle tissue on them, and that was like it started to come together. Then I started doing more
Hmm.
research, and then I realized I always knew about fascia, but that was well over 10 years ago, and I started to really, really dive in. And to the point where I network, I was on the board of directors of the Fascia Research Society for 3 years.
Love it.
Um, yeah, I built really close relationships with Robert Schleip and
Yeah.
Jan Wilke, and some of these high-level scientists from Germany and Italy and all over the world. I was able to dive in. But what got me involved in my mission for Fascia Training Academy is really to help people understand how to optimize performance, and not just
Okay.
performance on the athletic field, but general health and fitness. There's so many
Okay.
injuries, so much people going through so much pain, and so much of it maps back to not managing your collagenous network,
Yep.
not managing it correctly, and just not understanding movement patterns. I'm just talking just general movement hygiene, not
Hmm.
understanding the power of isometric contractions and what it does to fascia and the
Yep.
ground substance,
Yep.
and really just a mission. And then the injury epidemic in athletics,
Hmm.
it's a lot of it is fascia driven and not managing,
Yep.
because fascia is highly neurological, has eight
Yes.
times more the proprioceptors than muscle. So when you kind of don't manage it correctly, the neurology is off, and your ability to safeguard and co-contract and self-organize on a chaotic athletic field that you need to do, your system's just not, it's not wired right. It's not connected. Your wires are
Yeah.
crossed and your system's
Yeah.
not firing. And now you've got this collagenous tissue that might be overdeveloped in areas because you're doing similar movement patterns. You're living in the sagittal plane in the weight room. You're
Mm-hmm.
doing squat, you're doing deadlifts, you're doing step ups, you're doing lunges, you're doing all this sagittal plane stuff. And not only the wiring is so sagittally plane driven, but now the actual physiology, the collagen network now becomes
Mm-hmm.
sagittal plane driven, and your body's just not able to handle the chaotic moves you have to make on the athletic field. So that
Yep.
is my mission, to get education out there
Okay.
to
Okay.
the masses.
Got it. Love it. You mentioned one of my favorite kind of concepts is isometrics. I was a former gymnast, so I'm all about isometrics. Just talk about that. Like, what is the power behind isometrics? How do you use isometrics, both
Yeah.
from this injury prevention and then athletically?
Yeah, like I have really done a deep dive into isometrics, and I just coined a word called the the yo method,
The Yo
right?
method. Okay.
Yeah, the yo method. I just coined that recently. I don't know if anybody I came up with it, but I'm starting to use it. I thought of it. And the yo method is basically the three forms of isometrics that we use in our training.
Okay.
One, it's yielding isometrics.
Okay.
Yielding is overcoming gravitational force,
Okay.
meaning that if I have a bar on my back, like say heavy weight, and I'm going to come down to like a 3/4 squat and just hold that.
Okay.
I'm isometrically just sticking that thing, but I got gravity pulling me down.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm I'm yielding,
Okay.
and that is kind of creating an activation for the tensegrity structure of the body to kind of realign, and it's almost like a wheel alignment in a way,
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. Your body has to co-contract, your body has to stabilize. So you have all this co-contractions happening to kind of realign the yielding, and that tissue is getting pressurized, and it's getting challenged in a way that's going to make it fire and quote unquote co-contract, right?
Okay.
That's yielding. Overcoming isometrics is if now I have the bar on my back, and I go into the squat rack and I have pins, and I'm pressing up against the bar trying to push it,
Ah,
but
okay.
it's non-movable. I can't move it,
Okay.
right? So now that's going to be more focused. Now, all these concepts, they overlap. So it's not just
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
just do this technique and you only get this. You get all of them, but
Mm-hmm.
there's more emphasis on different areas. That one
Okay.
is more about neural drive and
Okay.
and 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 more motor unit recruitment, through different phases. Because when
Yep.
you do that pin squat, you're firing into that rack, and you're not like firing the same amount of force the entire set of 10 seconds or whatnot. You probably have force, but maybe it's a little less, then it's a little more. But with the weight on your back, you gotta maintain it or you're gonna fall, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's differences, but that's more neural drive, and
Okay.
that's more of a neurology type reset. But there's still benefits to the tensegrity model.
Okay.
So that's the overcoming, and then
Okay.
there's oscillatory
Okay.
isometrics, where we're in a most likely a yielding isometric phase, but the weight is obviously not as heavy, or it's a different movement where gravity is causing the isometric. We're not applying force, we're kind of accepting the force or managing that gravitational force. But then we're isometrically contracting, but we have little mini oscillating movements.
Okay.
It's just a
Yep.
little mini. It's a little mini oscillation, and
Yep.
that's like a pump to
Okay.
help manage the ground substance and help create micro shearing of the fascial layers to allow us to facilitate the secretion of hyaluronin and allow that to come and help us slide and glide. And there's a lot of research coming out on this. I'm excited to help push it out there and
Yep.
pioneer these concepts in terms of the quote unquote yo method.
Yeah. No, I love that. I'm a huge proponent of isometrics, and that was, as I had mentioned, a big part of how I trained. I like to do it when I do it personally when I lift. I like to do it at the end of the sets. Is that where you like to think
I
of isometrics, or do you do them on their own? Do you do it before a heavy rep?
I I like them before
Okay.
because of the stimulation that you get.
Like waking it
Uh,
up.
Yeah, I mean, because you're going to get so much, motor unit recruitment, and it's such a great stim.
Yep.
But I don't, there's lots of different benefits to isometrics. Like tendon health is a huge benefit. Keith Barr has done a
Hmm.
ton of research on, isometric training. The Germans have done a ton of research too on isometric to help tendons recover and heal because
Yep.
of the issues that we get with tendons, and when there's the shearing forces that go through tendons, and how they need to have this stress put upon them in a way that's going to realign the fibers.
Okay.
So the isometrics in terms of tendon health plays a big role, because when a tendon has an injury, and we might not even know the injury, we might have not have symptoms yet, but a
Hmm.
tendon's like a rope, and if you just take one strand of that rope and it breaks, and then a few more break, you might not feel pain, but it's getting weaker, and to
Hmm.
a point where more break, and now you start to feel some pain. If you
Hmm.
ignore it, keep doing things, and eventually the tendon's going to rupture, right?
Hmm.
So what happens when you have that stress on the tendon, the body wants to repair it or tries to repair it, but those fibers now are repaired, and but they're not aligned.
Hmm.
They're kind of more like felt. They're like
Oh.
carpeting. They're really stiff, and they don't have a lot of mobility, and that's where pain comes in, and that's where you know when a tendon isn't recovering correctly, it can rupture. But when you put isometrics through that injured tendon that's repairing, mechanical transduction is repair.
Hmm.
It's going to now realign those fibers to be more of a
Yep.
lattice type angles where they
Yep.
have more spring to them. So think of a lattice fence. That's how the fibers align in a tendon. Healthy tendons, the fibers align in that type of fashion, opposed to felt, where the fibers are all crossing one another and there's no flexibility. So your ligaments are more
Yep.
like felt. Your tendons need to be more like, really strong rubber bands.
Yep.
So understanding isometrics play a big role to helping managing tendon health.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. I speak a lot kind of on that injury side where I will do growth factors and regenerative medicine essentially to get that tendon in
Yeah.
a more integrated state. And then
Yeah.
once they've done the remodeling and the whole process that takes 3 months, then I refer them for programs such as what you're describing as adding the isometrics and the mechanical load now that they have these new collagen fibers to get them
Yeah.
into that lattice pattern. So I absolutely love this for the
Yeah.
listeners to see, okay, well, where do you take the athlete or the patient from the collagen deformation remodeling to
Right,
integrity,
right. And
strength and
it's so
integrity.
important to that to remodel the collagen the right way,
Right.
and stressing it the right way through
Totally.
the different forms of mechanical, through isometrics that will
Yep.
stimulate mechanical transduction, which is obviously mechanical stress that causes signal to the
Yep.
fibroblast cells to lay down collagen. But with the right types of stress, it's going to lay down collagen in the
Yep.
right patterns, and that's why we
Yep.
don't put people in casts anymore, right? Because when you get in a cast, what happens? All the collagen gets laid down, and it's like cement. Your body
Mm-hmm.
gets really stiff, and now your sensory system is all off. You lose all that proprioception, and you're just it's a mess. It's like
Yeah.
disastrous. That's why
Yeah.
people get moving right away after an injury. We don't want that to take place.
Yep. Totally. Totally. And one of the big injuries is like an ankle sprain. Is we
Yep.
move patients or athletes very quickly after an ankle sprain. I've had some patients have deleterious effects because they've been like casted after an ankle sprain because they're in a different country or something where the
Yeah.
the model's different. So, yeah, absolutely love it. So, I do want to transfer to our last topic, which is one that's near and dear to my heart, and that's the feet. So, tell us a little bit about your thoughts around the feet, how feet are so important to athleticism, and how you incorporate this with your athletes.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the relationship with you and your organization, all your phenomenal tools, I have them all. You're so dialed into the feet. But,
Mhm.
for us, we try to keep it really simple and keep it basic. First, we're
Okay.
always going to have our athletes start off barefoot, right? I
Okay.
mean, it's just basic. And we're going to do, depending on their training age and how long they've been training either with us or just in general, like assess their feet and see what they look like and can they splay their feet. And we're not going to, do the whole warm up maybe barefoot. We might do the first 5 minutes barefoot.
Okay.
And as you progress and you build that, we'll eventually do the whole warm up barefoot. And then we go into training, and depending on the training that day, we might stay barefoot or we might, put our shoes on depending on the athlete. So that's the first thing we do. And then, we really focus on doing and training barefoot in that warm up. So our warm up, it's so much more than a warm up, right? It's our active dynamic warm up. We're really on 3.0 right now, but it's really movement prep. It's work capacity. It's all these things in the first 15 to 20 minutes of our training, and it takes 15 to 20 minutes. So we do all these things, but we also then will work that movement prep and whatnot on different types of surfaces.
Okay.
So we might be on an Airdex pad with a couple things, and then we might be onto on the turf, and then maybe onto a track surface, and we'll intermix and we'll create artificial different surfaces where
Okay.
we'll do different activities where that response is different.
Okay.
The body has to now, respond to that different ground reaction force and what's it giving back, because when the
Mm-hmm.
surface is softer, you're not going to get as much ground reaction force back through the
Mm-hmm.
system, and
Mm-hmm.
the system's going to respond in a different way. And this is, a big, conundrum in the NFL, where like MetLife Stadium here in New Jersey, there's a lot of injuries that occur at MetLife, and they say, oh, it's the
Okay.
turf, it's the turf.
Okay.
Well, here's my, you know, assumption, or here's my viewpoint on this concept of athletes getting injured at MetLife. Well, if you're an NFL athlete, you're a finely tuned race car, like you're a
Mm-hmm.
machine. And if you're practicing on a certain type of surface, a certain softness or hardness all week long and play most of your games there, and then you come to a field that it's much softer, well, it's like going to play a game on the beach.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be different, risk factors with these athletes that are super high level, generating massive amounts of force.
Yeah.
If their body isn't really ready for it, I'm not saying that's the only factor. There's probably absolutely pre-existing conditions, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe that softness was something that just put it over the edge for that
Yeah.
to occur. So, I mean, when we talk about feet, we talk about being barefoot, looking at different surfaces. Obviously, we want to strengthen all planes of motion of the foot. We want to, obviously get the dorsiflexion and the
Mm-hmm.
anterior tib strong.
Mm-hmm.
We do things at a bent knee, the soleus, because we want to really hit the soleus.
Mm-hmm.
Because at acceleration, when we accelerate, you're at a bent knee, so we know
Mm-hmm.
the gastroc, is shortened,
Yep.
with a bent knee. So we don't get much out of the gastroc compared to the soleus. So we got to make sure we're hitting the entire 360 of the lower shank from
Yep.
a training perspective, and being barefoot and being on different surfaces and moving in different directions and doing different resistance strategies in omniplanar is how we address the feet, and it's a big part of what we do.
Yeah, I know. Obviously, the foot is the only contact point between the body and the ground, so I know you're going to train it.
Yeah.
How do the athletes respond to being barefoot? Just the idea of barefoot training. How do they respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, great question. At first, they were a little confused. They're like, it's kind of weird. But then after they get into it, the first session, they're like, oh wow, I can see this feels good. And then they ultimately feel like better without shoes. It's
Okay.
funny. Like when you start to train, you start to do things without shoes. You get it feels better, and it's interesting because I've been doing the barefoot stuff for a little bit now, obviously, and my walking, I do part of the things I do my active warm up and all, but I love doing uphill stuff. So I have a treadmill where I put it on 15-20%. And I
Mm-hmm.
love doing climbs, right?
Okay.
Climbs are just great. And I do it barefoot, and it's so great. And I'll do it in different angles and whatnot. Meaning I'll do sideways walks and backwards, on the treadmill.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm getting all 360, on that, along with
Yeah.
our active warm up. But I like sometimes just digging in and just going on a super high incline and just digging in and getting a lot of activation.
Yeah, I love that. What was interesting is I've been talking about barefoot for over a decade now
I
and
know.
trying to get athletes barefoot. But I remember when I started reading some of the initial benefits of barefoot research for athletes, and they would get these athletes, get them barefoot. There would always be this little paragraph at the end that was all of the athletes that were the subjects wanted to continue doing barefoot after the study. I always just thought it was so, they were like,
Yeah, I mean,
I like
y-
this.
and it really, to me, and I don't have any scientific evidence, you might, but I feel it also realigns the whole biotensegrity structure. Like I feel
Totally.
like, yeah, like when you're barefoot, I think it just kind of it's almost another way to align the body. It's another way to kind of reset your system. And it's
Yep.
it's it's a game changer. Like it's a complete, and you got to start off slow. You can't
Right.
all of a sudden go run 2 miles barefoot, or you can't
Right.
do a full workout barefoot. Start off with five
Yeah.
minutes of your
Yeah.
warm barefoot.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
start up there, and then gradually build up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Whenever I speak at like a strength conference, I'm like, whatever I'm going to tell you, just put in the first 15 minutes of what you're doing with the athletes. Then, right, you don't have to. I understand these are multi-million dollar assets that we are not trying to get injured. So put it in the
Yep.
movement prep. We're good. I love
Yes.
it. Well, I've enjoyed this so much, Bill. I do want to ask one last question as far as where you see the future of athletic performance. Maybe it ties into fascia, maybe feet, but where's the future that you believe or where you want to go?
Yeah, I feel there's a big miss in athletic performance training, specifically, really even at massively at the high school levels, and I think at the college and even in some professional levels. Um, really understanding the collagenous network and how it
Mm-hmm.
ties not only to the feet, but the
Mm-hmm.
entire system, understanding co-contractions, understanding the power of dynamic systems theory and what that means, and training from a constraints-led approach. I tell the story when I was down in Oracle, Arizona. I was down there, and you were down there, and I visited
Mm-hmm.
the Biosphere project, Biosphere
Mm-hmm.
3 project. This huge 3-acre greenhouse where these 8 scientists were living for 2 years without any outside air, and they tried to see if they could live out of space, and they brought in animals and plants and trees and created a rainforest indoors and created an ocean, indoor ocean, and all these environments inside this 3-acre greenhouse in Oracle, Arizona. And I
Mm-hmm.
visited the place, and obviously I looked at the history, and I noticed, and I learned that when these trees grew, this was back in the late 80s, they did this project,
Mm-hmm.
89, 90. These
Mm-hmm.
trees grew to like 30 feet, 40 feet. The ceiling was very high. And after a while, the trees got to a certain height and then tipped over because the trees did not create any stress wood because there was no wind inside this greenhouse.
Mm-hmm.
And without that wind, without that unpredictable stress, the
Yep.
trees couldn't really create the appropriate strength it needed to survive.
Yep.
We are more like Humans are more like plants than machines.
Yeah.
We have to change the paradigm that
Yep.
we're not training this machine with lever arms and fulcrums and axis points. It's not how it works. It's
Yeah.
not how the body works, especially specifically on the athletic field, but just in
Yeah.
general.
Yeah.
And so we need unpredictable stress. The body needs to learn from this unpredictable stress so the body can self-organize, and the body is very adaptable organism where we apply these stresses in unpredictable environments like being
Mm-hmm.
barefoot or going on
Mm-hmm.
different surfaces. We're naturally teaching the system from the ground up. So it's called the bottoms up approach. And what I'm describing here is, dynamic systems theory training, which is a theory of using different types of constraints to have the body learn skill through not necessarily repetition, but through kind of I guess repetition, but through trial and error, and not a whole lot of conscious mental thought. Let the body
Mm-hmm.
just figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe the fascia plays a very big role in this area to send signals to muscles to contract based on
Yep.
threat.
Yep.
And what do I mean by this? I think bird flocks and schools of fish. When you study schools of fish and how birds flock together,
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing how you can see a flock of 100 birds, 500, 1,000 birds, all flying in sequence without crashing into one another.
Yeah.
And why they do that, one of the reasons why they fly in flocks is to avoid a threat, avoid to being eaten by a bigger bird or schools of fish, right? But these birds have this sensory mechanism. They don't have one direct leader. It's not like the brain telling the body do this, do this. The birds have this sensory and their local environment, and they kind of are signaled by this overall environment, and they all fly together.
Yeah.
I believe our human body, the fascia connects the cells, and the contraction of the cells are like the birds in a flock. And when we sense a threat, when the foot hits a divot in the ground where we're trying to change direction, the untrained athlete or the improperly trained athlete is going to blow out his ACL. The properly trained athlete has already experienced that type of threat through different types of dynamic systems training, where that local contraction is going to happen without even coming up to the spinal cord. From the neurology within the fascia is like these birds flying. Every cell is a bird. It senses the threat, and they all co-contract to create stability in that joint so we don't blow it out. So that fascia plays a role. The research is catching up. I had a really detailed conversation with Robert Schleip. He's a top German scientist. I ran this by him. He said, absolutely, Bill. That is a very strong theory. That's where we're going, where the body can facilitate co-contractions through fascia, through protecting that joint in that threatening situation. So anyway, I want to get that information out there.
Yeah, no,
that's what I'm passionate about.
I love that, and I can tell. And you are a wealth of knowledge. I highly, highly encourage people to listen to this again, because every so many minutes was this incredible, like, mic drop moment where I absolutely loved it. So where do people learn more about your work, what you do personally and professionally? Of course, the Fascia Training Academy, Parisi Speed School. Where's the best way to go?
Yeah, I mean, all those. I mean, we have our Anatomy of Speed course goes over a lot of our movements, everything I described from a movement perspective. You can find that at anatomyofspeed.com. Obviously, Fascia Training Academy.com is where all of our fascia stuff lives. And then, our Parisi Speed School, if anybody's interested in an affiliate. So we sell not only certifications and education, but we also sell affiliates where people actually have access and are part of the Parisi family to be a Parisi Speed School or use our content and come to our annual summits and be part of that Italian family that we have, which we invite all types of people, any race, any creed, any nationality. We all like to eat, though.
There you go. True Italian. I absolutely love that. Well, thank you so much for your time, Bill. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure.
And thank you, everyone. That was definitely an information-packed episode, so do listen back. And there were some key takeaways as far as gravity, isometrics, fascia, feet, mechanical load. I absolutely enjoyed it. So thank you for tuning in, and I will see you on another episode soon.